The morning sun barely touched the compound walls when Grace Mitchell started her shift. 4:30 a.m., same as always. She moved through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, her boots making no sound on the concrete floor.
Requesting extraction
Outside,
at my location.
the desert
Over.
stretched for miles in every direction. Forward operating base Sentinel sat like a forgotten coin in the sand, home to 24 support personnel and a rotating SEAL team that rarely spoke to anyone outside their unit. Grace wasn't military anymore. Hadn't been for 3 years. She wore civilian contractor clothes, dark pants, plain shirt, no insignia. Her dark blonde hair stayed tied back. Her hands stayed busy. She prepped breakfast for 30. Eggs, bacon, coffee strong enough to wake the dead. The rhythm calmed her. Crack, whisk, pour, flip, serve, clean. Simple work. Honest work. Work that didn't require her to remember. The SEALs filtered in around 0600. They sat together, always the same table, speaking in low voices about things she didn't need to hear. They nodded to her when she refilled their coffee. Polite? Distant. At least she cooks better than the last guy, one of them said, not unkindly. Grace didn't respond. She never did. But she noticed things. The way Petty Officer Jenkins favored his left ankle after yesterday's training run. The way their team leader, a quiet man named Brennan, checked the perimeter fencing before every meal. The way the newest member couldn't be more than 22 still flinched at unexpected sounds. She noticed the helicopter schedules had changed. 3 flights yesterday when there should have been one. The supply truck arrived 6 hours late with no explanation. Small details. Most people wouldn't see them. Grace saw everything. She reached under the counter for a clean cutting board, and her hand brushed against something else. Something she'd placed there 14 months ago when she first took this job. Hidden behind the industrial-sized flour bags, wrapped in oilcloth. She hadn't touched it since. Her knife work was precise as she prepped vegetables for lunch. Each cut, exact, efficient, muscle memory from 1,000 repetitions. But these repetitions hadn't been learned in culinary school. Morning, Grace. The voice belonged to Marcus Webb, the logistics officer. Mid-40s, kind eyes, soft around the middle. He coordinated supplies, managed schedules, kept the base running. Smells great as usual. Coffee's fresh, she said. You're a lifesaver. He poured himself a cup, added too much sugar. Hey, you ever serve? The question came out casual, but Grace's hand stilled for just a fraction of a second. Long time ago, she said. Different life. Figured. You got that look. Marcus smiled. My cousin was Army. Same way you carry yourself. All business. Grace returned to chopping. The conversation was over. At 0900, the SEAL team gathered their gear. Mission brief. They'd be gone by noon, back in 36 hours if everything went clean. Brennan checked his rifle 3 times. Jenkins retaped his ankle. The young one, Patterson, kept touching his vest pocket where he probably kept a photo or a letter. Grace watched from the kitchen window as they loaded into vehicles, counted heads, checked their spacing, old habits. Then she saw what the others missed. The way Brennan paused before climbing in. The way he looked back at the compound, his eyes sweeping the roofline, the walls, the road leading out. Not routine caution, something else. He felt it too. The wrongness in the air. Grace turned back to her prep work, but her mind cataloged everything. Wind direction, shifting northeast. Local bird activity, too quiet. Radio chatter from the communications building, clipped, tense. She moved to the storage area and did an inventory she didn't need to do. Checked the locks on the side entrance, noted which windows had clear sight lines. Memorized the distance between the kitchen and the armory. Just being thorough, she told herself. Just being smart. At 1300 hours, she started prep for dinner. The routine soothed her, browned the meat, diced the onions, let the sauce simmer. She could lose herself in this work, become just the cook, just Grace. Nobody special, nobody dangerous. Her phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. Generator acting up again. Might need to switch to backup tonight. She typed back. Understood. But she pulled out the emergency lamp from under the sink and set it where she could reach it. Then she checked that the side door was locked. Then she moved a heavy stockpot closer to the stove, somewhere she could grab it quickly if needed. The afternoon dragged. 2 maintenance workers came in for coffee. A medic grabbed an early sandwich. Everyone moved slowly, tired from the heat. Grace worked and watched. The sun tracked across the sky. At 1800 hours, she served dinner to the skeleton crew. 12 people, mostly support staff. One injured SEAL who'd stayed behind with a twisted knee. Everyone ate quickly, mechanically. "Quiet tonight," Marcus said. "Always is when the team's out," Grace replied. But it wasn't that kind of quiet. At 2100 hours, Grace cleaned the kitchen for the night. She scrubbed every surface until it gleamed, put away the industrial mixer, covered the leftover food, turned off most of the lights. Then she reached under the counter and moved the flour bags aside. The oilcloth bundle was exactly where she'd left it. She didn't open it, didn't need to, just rested her hand on it for a moment, feeling the familiar weight underneath. "Hope I don't need you," she whispered. Then she pushed the flour bags back into place and went to her quarters. Grace woke at 0300 without an alarm. Old instincts. She lay in the darkness of her small room and listened. Something was wrong. The night sounds were off. The generator hummed at a different pitch. The wind had shifted again now, coming from the northwest, carrying a smell she couldn't quite place. And underneath it all, a silence where there shouldn't be one. The guard rotation had changed. She'd memorized their patterns months ago. Every 4 hours, boots on gravel as they switched posts, the faint squawk of radios, low voices exchanging passwords. Tonight, nothing. Grace dressed in the dark. She didn't turn on lights. Her hands found clothes by memory, dark colors, sturdy boots, everything tied down and secured. She moved to the small mirror and pulled her hair back tighter than usual, then checked her phone. No messages. She pulled up the base duty roster she'd photographed last week. The guard shift should have rotated at 0300, but her window faced the eastern perimeter, and she hadn't heard the usual sounds. Either they'd changed protocols without telling anyone, or something had happened to the guards. Grace moved through the dark hallways toward the kitchen. The compound was built in a rough square barracks on one side, operations and communications on another, her kitchen and storage on the third, vehicle bay and armory on the fourth. The inner courtyard held the generator, water tanks, and a sad attempt at a garden that had died in the second month. She knew every sightline, every blind spot, every place where someone could hide, or where you'd funnel an assault team if you were trying to breach. The kitchen door was still locked. She slipped inside and didn't turn on the main lights, just the small lamp under the counter, giving off a dim red glow that wouldn't be visible from outside. Then she opened the emergency radio channel on her phone, a frequency that should be broadcasting the guard rotation check-ins. Static. Pure, unbroken static. Grace set the phone down carefully. Her breathing stayed even, controlled. She moved to the window and looked out at the compound. The exterior lights were on, same as always. No obvious signs of trouble. But the wrongness crawled up her spine like a live wire. She counted the visible windows in the barracks. 3 showed lights, normal for 0330 insomniacs, early risers, people who couldn't sleep in the desert heat. But the communications building was completely dark. That building never went dark. 24/7 operations. Always at least 2 people on duty monitoring channels, coordinating with command, tracking the SEAL team's mission progress. Grace moved away from the window. She went to the storage room and unlocked the cabinet where she kept the kitchen's first aid supplies. Behind the bandages and antiseptic, hidden in a coffee can labeled "Sugar, do not use," she'd stored 3 items: a prepaid phone with encrypted messaging, a single physical key, and a small notebook with numbers that looked like recipe measurements but weren't. She palmed the key and left everything else. Then she returned to the main kitchen and reached under the counter, moved the flour bags, unwrapped the oilcloth. Inside, her old KBAR knife, 7 inches of blackened steel. She'd carried it through 12 deployments and it had never failed her. She clipped it to her belt under her shirt. Then she started making coffee. Real work, visible work. If anyone looked in, they'd see just the cook starting her early morning routine. But while the coffee brewed, she moved through the kitchen with different purpose. She unlocked the side door leading to the storage yard, just the deadbolt, leaving the handle lock engaged. She pulled 3 large stock pots from the overhead rack and positioned them on the counter near the stove. She moved the industrial mixer to block one approach angle to where she stood. She checked which lights could be turned off quickly from which switches. At 0400, Marcus Webb appeared at the kitchen door. He looked terrible pale, sweating despite the cool morning air. "Grace," he said, "have you heard from communications?" "No." "You?" "I can't raise them. Radio, phone, nothing." His voice climbed higher, "and the guards aren't responding to check-ins." "When did you last hear from anyone?" "Oh, 2:30. Johnson confirmed his post. Then nothing." Grace poured him coffee he didn't ask for. "Drink this, then tell me exactly what you know." Marcus's hand shook as he took the cup. "The SEAL team checked in at 2200 last night. Standard progress report. Everything on schedule. But their next check-in at 0200 never came. I tried raising them. Nothing. Then I tried calling communications to see if it was our equipment. And that line's dead too." "What about the backup channels?" "I'm logistics, Grace. I don't have access to." He stopped, looked at her, really looked at her. "How do you know about backup channels?" She ignored the question. "Where's Turner?" "The injured SEAL who'd stayed behind." "Barracks, I think. He was in the rec room last I saw." "Get him. Quietly. Don't use the radio. Tell him communications is down and the guards aren't responding. Then both of you come back here." "Why here?" "Because this building has the best sight lines and the most exits." Grace set down her coffee. "And because if someone's coming, they'll assume the kitchen is the least defended position." Marcus stared at her. "Grace, what the hell is?" "Move. Now." Something in her voice made him go. Grace turned off the coffee maker. She walked to each window and adjusted the blinds, not closed, but angled so she could see out without being easily visible. She moved to the walk-in refrigerator and propped the door open with a wedge, not for food, for cover. Then she stood in the center of the kitchen and closed her eyes. Drew the compound map in her mind. If she were planning an assault, where would she come from? The north wall backed onto open desert, hardest approach, but most concealment. The east faced the access road, too exposed. South and west bordered maintenance yards with stacked equipment. They'd come from the north. Multiple entry points to keep defenders split. Probably during shift change, when guard positions were in flux. Communications first to prevent calls for help. Then the barracks to control personnel, which meant they were already here. Grace opened her eyes. Her hand rested on the knife at her belt. She'd told herself she'd never need it again. Told herself those days were done. She'd been wrong. Footsteps in the corridor. Grace's stance shifted slightly, weight balanced. Then Marcus pushed through the door, with Turner hobbling behind him. Turner was big, late 20s, with a knee wrapped in so much tape it looked like a club. But his eyes were sharp, and they swept the kitchen in a single practiced glance. "Marcus says comms are down," Turner said. "Completely dark," Grace confirmed. "Guards not responding either." Turner's jaw tightened. "That doesn't happen by accident." "No," Grace agreed. "It doesn't." "So what are we doing in the kitchen?" Grace met his eyes. "Waiting to see if I'm wrong. And if you're not wrong, then we hold this position until help arrives." Turner studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "You've got a plan." It wasn't a question. "Marcus," Grace said, "kill the hallway lights. Do it from here." She pointed to the breaker box on the wall. "Leave the kitchen lit. I want them to think we don't know they're coming." Grace Marcus started. "Do it." He flipped the switches. The hallway outside went dark. "Turner, how's your knee?" "Garbage. I can stand and shoot, but I'm not running anywhere." "You won't need to. How many rounds you carrying?" His eyes narrowed. "Who trained you?" Grace didn't answer. "How many rounds?" "Magazine and a half. Wasn't expecting to need my weapon in the damn kitchen." "It'll be enough." She looked at Marcus. "There's a fire extinguisher by the storage door. Get it. If someone comes through who isn't supposed to be here, aim for their face and don't stop spraying until I tell you." "Oh God," Marcus whispered. "This is really happening." "Yes," Grace said simply. "It is." Turner positioned himself behind the industrial mixer, using it as cover while keeping his pistol trained on the main door. Grace moved to the side, where she had angles on both entrances. Marcus clutched the fire extinguisher like a drowning man holding driftwood. They waited. The clock above the sink ticked. 04:23, 04:24. Then, very faintly, Grace heard it. Boots on concrete. Multiple sets. Moving with tactical precision through the compound. Coming closer. The footsteps stopped outside the kitchen door. Grace held up her hand. Turner froze. Marcus looked like he might pass out, but he kept quiet. The fire extinguisher trembled in his grip. Through the gap at the bottom of the door, Grace watched shadows shift. At least 2 people. They weren't trying to be particularly quiet, which meant they thought they had control of the compound, thought everyone was already contained or neutralized. They hadn't counted on anyone being in the kitchen. The door handle turned slowly, locked. A pause. Then, a quiet voice in a language Grace recognized but knew Marcus and Turner wouldn't. The voice was assessing, reporting. The shadows moved away. Grace waited 5 full minutes before lowering her hand. "They're checking all the buildings," she whispered. "Securing the compound room by room." "How many?" Turner's whisper was barely audible. "At least 6. Probably 8. Professional entry team." "How do you know that?" Grace didn't answer. She moved to the storage room and returned with 3 bottles of water. "Drink. Stay hydrated. This is going to be a long morning." Turner took the water but didn't drink. "You need to tell me what's happening." "What's happening is someone launched a coordinated assault on this base. They timed it for when our SEAL team was out on mission. They took communications first, then the guards, and now they're clearing buildings." "That's what I assessed too," Turner said. "What I'm asking is how a cook knows tactical assault patterns." Grace met his gaze. "Does it matter right now?" "Yeah, it actually does. Because you're making command decisions and I need to know if I should follow them or take over." "Fair point." Grace respected that. "I was a contractor in Kandahar. Worked with SEAL teams providing operational support. It was technically true. Just not the whole truth." Turner studied her. He knew she was holding back, but he also knew this wasn't the time to push. "All right. So what's your assessment?" "They want the base intact, which means this is probably a hostage situation. They'll gather everyone in one location, probably the rec room or the courtyard. But they won't expect resistance from support staff, so they'll be less careful when they get here." "Advantage us." "Small advantage," Grace corrected. "They're still trained soldiers and we're 3 people, one of whom can barely walk and another who's never held a weapon." Marcus made a small sound. "I was on a high school rifle team." "That was 30 years ago, Marcus." 25, he said weakly. The building's ventilation system kicked on with a low hum. In the distance, through walls and doors, they heard voices, commands being given, doors being opened, the methodical sounds of a building being cleared. Grace moved to the windows again. The sun was starting to rise, painting the desert in shades of orange and gold. In different circumstances, it would be beautiful. "They've got the barracks," Turner said quietly. He was watching the north windows. "I can see people being moved into the courtyard. Looks like 9, maybe 10. Grace joined him. Sure enough, base personnel were being herded out at gunpoint. Most still in sleeping clothes, hands on their heads, 3 armed figures in mismatched tactical gear, not military standard, which meant mercenaries or insurgents with decent funding. "Can you ID any of them?" Grace asked. "Not from here. Gear's a mix of Russian and Chinese manufacturers. Could be anyone." One of the prisoners stumbled. A guard raised his rifle butt to strike. Grace's hand moved instinctively toward her knife, but she forced herself to stay still. Not yet. Timing was everything. More prisoners emerged, 12 total now, all the remaining base personnel except for the 3 of them. "They'll come for us next," Marcus whispered. "Yes," Grace said. "They will." "What do we do?" Grace pulled back from the window. "We make them think we're not a threat. Marcus, sit at that table. Put your head down like you fell asleep. Turner, you're going to sit across from him. Keep your sidearm under the table, but don't draw unless you have to." "What about you?" "I'm going to be cooking." Grace moved to the stove and started pulling out pans. "Because that's what I do. That's what they'll expect." Turner positioned himself at the table. His knee was clearly hurting, but he masked it well. Marcus sat across from him, arms folded on the table, head down. He was shaking. Grace cracked eggs into a bowl, started bacon in a pan. The smell filled the kitchen normal, domestic, unthreatening. She moved with deliberate calm, like this was any other morning. "Grace," Turner said, "if this goes bad, it won't. But if it does, then you protect Marcus and wait for the SEAL team to return. They'll realize something's wrong when they can't make contact. They'll come in hard and fast." That could be 12 hours from now. Then we hold for 12 hours. The bacon sizzled. Grace flipped it with practiced ease. Outside, the sky continued to lighten. Birds started their morning calls, some normalcy returning to the world even as everything else fell apart. Footsteps in the hallway again. Closer this time, multiple sets. Grace added eggs to the pan. The smell intensified. The kitchen door burst open. 3 men entered, all armed with AK pattern rifles. They moved with trained precision, one high, one low, one covering the corners. Their faces were covered with dark wraps showing only eyes. Professional, careful. They saw Marcus at the table, apparently asleep. Saw Turner with his hands visible. Saw Grace at the stove. The leader barked something in Arabic. Grace didn't react, didn't indicate she understood. She just looked at them with appropriate civilian fear. Wide eyes, raised hands, still holding a spatula. "English?" the leader said. Heavy accent. "You speak?" Grace nodded. Didn't trust her voice not to give something away. "You come with us. Now. Leave everything." Turner stood slowly, favoring his bad knee. He kept his hands visible, his sidearms still hidden under his shirt. "What's happening? Who are you?" "No questions. You come." Marcus lifted his head. His fear was real, which sold it. "Please, we're just support staff. We're not soldiers." "I know. You come anyway." Grace turned off the stove. A detail the leader noted good civilian instinct, preventing fires, making her seem even less threatening. She set down the spatula and moved toward them. The leader gestured with his rifle. "Out. Join the others." They filed toward the door. Grace went last. As she passed the counter, her hand brushed against one of the stock pots she'd positioned earlier. Such a small movement, probably not even noticeable, but the pot shifted. Just slightly. Just enough. They were herded into the hallway. More armed figures waited there. Grace counted 6 total now. 8 was still her estimate for the full team. 2 probably watching the perimeter or monitoring communications equipment. The pre-dawn air hit them as they emerged into the courtyard. The other prisoners huddled together, all showing various degrees of fear and confusion. Some had been roughed up, split lips, bruising, but nothing too severe. Hostages were valuable. Dead bodies complicated things. Grace, Marcus, and Turner were pushed toward the group. One of the guards separated Turner, recognizing him as military despite the civilian clothes. "You," the guard said. "SEAL?" "Support," Turner lied. "Admin work, injured, so they left me behind." The guard didn't believe him but didn't push it. Yet, the leader who'd cleared the kitchen was speaking into a radio. Grace couldn't hear the words, but she recognized the cadence. Coordinating, confirming, all buildings secured, all personnel accounted for. The sun crested the horizon. In the growing light, Grace studied the compound with new eyes. The positions of the guards, the sight lines, the distances, every detail cataloged and assessed. Marcus leaned close to her. "What now?" he breathed. "Now we wait," Grace whispered back. "And we watch." Because this wasn't over. The SEAL team would return, or command would notice the missed check-ins and send a response. Help was coming. The question was whether they'd still be alive when it arrived. The morning sun climbed higher, and with it came the heat. The 12 prisoners sat in the courtyard dirt while 6 guards maintained a perimeter. They'd been there 90 minutes now. No food, no water, no explanation. Grace sat cross-legged, shoulders relaxed, face carefully blank, but her mind never stopped working. The guards rotated positions every 20 minutes, good discipline. They maintained overlapping fields of fire, professional, but not perfect. The one watching the eastern approach kept checking his phone. Another adjusted his weapon sling too frequently. Small tells, useful ones. The leader emerged from the communications building. Grace studied him with peripheral vision, mid-30s. Moved like someone with real military training, not just mercenary work, Russian equipment, but his hand signals were NATO standard. Interesting. He spoke into his radio, listened, then approached the prisoners. "Listen carefully," he said in accented English. "Your SEAL team has been notified of the situation. We have made our demands. If they are met, you will be released unharmed. If not," he let the sentence hang. One of the maintenance workers, a kid named Danny who couldn't be more than 20, started crying quietly. The guard nearest to him shifted, uncomfortable. "Another tell? How long?" Turner asked. His voice was steady, controlled. "That depends on your people. What do you want?" The leader smiled behind his face wrap. "That is not your concern." He walked away. Grace watched him stop at the communications building and confer with someone inside. Then he made a phone call, satellite phone, not base equipment. Smart, can't be traced easily. "This is bad," Marcus whispered. "This is really bad." "Stay calm," Grace breathed back. "Show fear, but not panic. We need them to see us as compliant." Turner caught her eye, gave the smallest nod. He understood. They were both running the same calculations. How many guards, what weapons, what positions, what opportunities. But they were also both thinking the same thing. Even if an opportunity came, what could they do? Turner had a concealed sidearm with maybe 20 rounds. Grace had a knife. Against 6 armed men with automatic rifles and professional training, the odds were not good. Another hour passed. The heat became oppressive. 2 of the prisoners asked for water. The guards ignored them. Dehydration was a tactic. Make them weak, make them compliant, make them less likely to cause trouble. Grace had been dehydrated before. In worse places than this, she knew how to manage it, how to conserve energy, how to stay sharp when your body wanted to shut down. But the others didn't. Already some of them were fading. At 0900, one of the guards brought out a single bottle of water, made a show of drinking it in front of them. Psychological warfare. Basic, but effective. Danny cried harder. The leader returned. He pointed to Turner. "You, come." Turner stood carefully. His knee was worse now from sitting in the heat. He hobbled forward. "You know tactical procedures," the leader said. "You know how your SEAL team operates, so you know they cannot rescue you. Not without casualties. Many casualties." He gestured to the gathered prisoners. "These people die if there is assault." "Then why are you telling me this?" "Because you will tell them. You will convince them to meet our demands." He shoved a satellite phone at Turner. "Call them." Turner took the phone. His face showed nothing. "What do I say?" "You tell them everyone lives if they cooperate. You tell them we have explosives placed throughout the compound. You tell them any rescue attempt means everyone dies. And if I refuse?" The leader pulled his sidearm and pointed it at Danny's head. "Then this one dies, and then the next, and the next, until you cooperate, or we run out of hostages." Danny sobbed. The sound was pitiful. Turner looked at Grace. Just for a second, she gave the tiniest shake of her head. But he made the call anyway. Because what choice did he have? Grace listened as he relayed the message. His voice stayed professional, military calm, but she heard the undercurrent, the way he emphasized certain words, the pauses he inserted. He was communicating more than just the script, signaling, hoping whoever received the call would read between the lines. Smart man. The call ended. The leader took back the phone. "Good, now you sit." Turner returned to the group. His face was gray, whether from pain or stress, or both. He sank down next to Grace. "They know now," he whispered. "They'll come." "Not yet," Grace whispered back. "They'll assess, plan, wait for the right moment." Will there be a right moment? Grace didn't answer. Because the truth was, she didn't know. In a hostage situation this well executed, options were limited. The SEAL team couldn't just storm in. Too many civilians, too much risk. They'd need to negotiate. Buy time. Look for weaknesses. Or they'd need someone on the inside to create an opportunity. Grace shifted slightly. The knife pressed against her ribs under her shirt, 7 inches of steel that nobody knew she carried. Her hands were free. She'd been cataloging distances, guard positions, sight lines. She could reach the nearest guard in 4 seconds, kill him in 2 more, take his weapon, but then what? She'd be exposed in the middle of the courtyard with 5 other rifles trained on her. And even if she was fast enough, lucky enough to take down 2 or 3 more, they'd start executing prisoners. Not yet. The moment wasn't right. But it was coming. She could feel it building like pressure before a storm. At 1100, the leader's radio crackled. He stepped away to take the call. Grace watched his body language change, tension in his shoulders, sharper hand gestures. Something was wrong. Not going according to plan. He barked orders to his men. 3 of them moved to defensive positions. 2 more entered the armory building. The leader himself moved to the main gate, scanning the desert beyond. They were worried. Which meant the SEAL team wasn't playing along, wasn't agreeing to demands, was maybe already moving into position. The leader returned to the courtyard. His eyes swept the prisoners. Landed on Grace. "You," he said. "The cook. Stand up." Grace's heart rate didn't change. She stood smoothly, showing just enough fear to be believable. He studied her. "You were in the kitchen this morning, cooking breakfast. You didn't run, didn't hide. You just cooked." "I didn't know anything was wrong." "Strange," he said. "Everyone else, they panic when we arrive. They cry, they plead. But you?" He stepped closer. "You just looked at us. Very calm, very controlled." Grace said nothing. "Who are you?" he asked. "Just the cook." He grabbed her chin, forced her to meet his eyes. She let him, kept her body language submissive while her mind calculated exactly how she'd disarm him if she needed to. "I don't believe you," he said softly. Then his radio crackled again. Urgent voices. He released Grace and turned away, speaking rapidly in Arabic. Grace caught enough to understand. Perimeter breach. Multiple contacts. The SEAL team was here. Time seemed to slow. Grace assessed the new tactical situation in seconds. The guards were distracted, focused outward on the approaching threat. The prisoners were terrified, which would make them unpredictable. Turner was watching her, waiting. The moment still wasn't right. But it was getting close. The compound erupted in chaos. Gunfire cracked from the perimeter, warning shots, or actual engagement. Grace couldn't tell yet. The guards shouted commands, repositioning to face the external threat. The leader barked orders. 2 guards grabbed prisoners Danny and a female medic named Rivera, dragging them toward the communications building. Human shields. The other guards formed a defensive line facing the main gate, which left the courtyard temporarily less defended. Grace caught Turner's eye. He gave the smallest nod. He saw it too. "Everyone stay down," the leader shouted at the remaining prisoners. Then he ran toward the perimeter, leaving only 1 guard to watch them, the nervous one who'd been checking his phone earlier. This was it. Grace slowly raised her hands, like she was going to comply. Then she stumbled, as if dizzy from the heat, fell to her knees. The guard glanced at her, dismissed her as a threat. Fatal mistake. Grace lunged forward, covering the 15 feet between them in seconds. The guard tried to swing his rifle around, but she was already inside his reach. Her hand struck his throat, precise, controlled, cutting off his air and his ability to shout. As he staggered back, her other hand drew the knife from her belt. The blade went between his ribs, angled up, once. He dropped without making a sound. Grace caught his rifle before it hit the ground. AK-74, M magazine, 3/4 full. She pulled 2 more magazines from his vest while Turner moved up beside her. "Jesus Christ," he breathed. "You just..." Later, Grace handed him the dead guard's sidearm. "Get everyone to the kitchen, now." The kitchen? Best defensive position. Go. While Turner organized the prisoners, Grace moved to the edge of the courtyard. The fighting at the perimeter was intensifying. Through the morning haze, she could see movement, SEAL team advancing, using vehicles as cover. Professional, patient. They weren't rushing in. They were setting up a proper assault, which meant the guards would need to reposition, which meant they'd pull back to more defensible positions, which meant they'd come through the courtyard. Grace sprinted for the kitchen. Turner had already gotten most of the prisoners inside. Marcus was helping an older logistics officer who could barely walk from dehydration. Grace covered their movement, rifle up, scanning for threats. They piled into the kitchen. Grace was the last one in. She slammed the door and threw the deadbolt, then moved to the windows and killed the overhead lights, leaving only the red emergency lamp. "Everyone in the walk-in cooler," she ordered. "Now." "We'll freeze," someone protested. "You'll die out here. Move." They crowded into the refrigerated space. Grace left the door propped open. She wasn't trapping them, just putting barriers between civilians and bullets. Then she turned to Turner. "Can you shoot?" "Yeah." "Good. You take the north window. I've got south and east. Anyone comes through that door who isn't American military, You drop them. Copy. Turner moved into position, using the industrial mixer as cover just like she'd positioned it earlier. Grace checked her rifle. 27 rounds, plus 2 magazines, 87 total. Better than nothing. Her knife was back on her belt, slick with blood she hadn't had time to clean. She could hear the firefight outside clearly now. The sharp crack of M4 carbines, seal weapons, the heavier reports of AK pattern rifles, shouted commands in multiple languages, then running footsteps in the hallway. Grace pressed against the wall beside the door. Turner aimed at it from his position. 3 seconds, 2, 1. The door exploded inward. 2 guards rushed through, using standard room-clearing tactics. They expected empty space or cowering civilians. They got Grace instead. She took the first one with a controlled burst to center mass. 3 rounds. He went down hard. The second guard tried to track her, but Turner fired from the side, catching him in the shoulder. The guard spun, tried to bring his weapon around. Grace finished him with a headshot. 2 down, bodies in the doorway. Not ideal, they'd have to clear them to see approaches, but it would slow any follow-up entry. Reload, Grace said. Already done, Turner replied. His hands were steady. Good. More footsteps, slower this time, cautious. They knew the kitchen was defended now. Grace moved to the window, saw 3 guards taking cover behind a supply truck in the courtyard. One had a radio, calling for backup or updating their leader. She couldn't let them consolidate. Grace moved to the storage room, grabbed one of the stock pots she'd positioned earlier, filled it with water from the sink. Then she kicked open the side door, the one she'd unlocked hours ago, and threw the pot with everything she had. Terrible weapon, but effective distraction. The guards turned toward the noise. Grace was already moving, coming around the doorway low and fast. She dropped 2 of them before they could react. The third got his rifle up, but she rolled behind the truck's wheel well. His rounds sparked off metal. Grace popped up on the other side of the truck, put 2 rounds through the engine block to pin him, watched him dive for different cover. Then she shot him as he ran. 3 more down. Her ears rang from the gunfire. Smoke from the weapons hung in the air. She checked her magazine, 17 rounds left. Grace! Turner's voice from inside. We've got movement on the north side. She sprinted back to the kitchen, came through the side door, slammed it behind her. 2 more guards were trying to flank through the mess hall adjacent to the kitchen. Turner was keeping them suppressed, but they had better cover. Grace grabbed another stockpot, filled it partway, turned on the stove to high. What are you doing? Turner asked, making them regret their approach. She waited until the water was boiling. Then she opened the connecting door to the mess hall just enough to throw the pot through. Screams. The guards stumbled back, faces and hands scalded. Grace and Turner both opened fire through the doorway. 2 more down. Grace's breathing was controlled. Her mind was clear. Every movement was muscle memory from 1,000 training runs, 100 real firefights. This was what she'd been, what she'd walked away from. But not today. Today, those skills were keeping people alive. The gunfire outside was diminishing. Either the SEAL team was winning or the guards were falling back. Grace risked a look out the south window. The compound gates were breached. She could see SEAL operators advancing in coordinated pairs, clearing buildings methodically. Professional, beautiful to watch if you knew what you were seeing. But the leader was still out there, along with at least 2 more guards, and they still had Danny and Rivera as hostages. Grace's radio, taken from one of the dead guards, crackled to life. Arabic, then English. I know you're in there, the leader's voice said. The one from the courtyard, the cook. She didn't respond. You fight like you were trained, like you were one of them. A pause. So you understand what I'm saying when I tell you I have 2 of your people. And if you don't lay down your weapons and come out, I will execute them both. Grace looked at Turner. His face was grim. What do we do? He asked. Grace checked her rifle, checked her knife. Then she looked at the innocent people huddled in the walk-in cooler, people who'd trusted her, people she'd kept alive. You stay here, she said. Keep them safe. Grace. That's an order. Turner's eyes widened. Because that was command voice. Real command voice. The kind only certain people could use. Who are you? He asked quietly. Grace met his gaze. Nobody important, just the cook. Then she opened the kitchen door and stepped into the kill zone. Grace walked into the courtyard with her hands visible, rifle slung across her back. She'd left the knife hidden. Always keep something in reserve. The leader stood near the communications building, using Danny and Rivera as shields. 2 remaining guards flanked him, weapons trained on Grace. The morning sun cast long shadows. Smoke drifted from the damaged buildings. "Drop the rifle," the leader ordered. Grace complied. It hit the dirt with a thud. "Now, walk forward, slowly." She did, scanning her surroundings with peripheral vision. The SEAL team was close. She could see movement in the buildings opposite. They had positions. They were waiting for a clear shot, but with the hostages so close to the guards, the angle was impossible. This had to be resolved differently. "Stop," the leader commanded when she was 10 feet away. He studied her with sharp eyes. "You killed 7 of my men. By yourself." "No." Turner helped. "The injured SEAL?" The leader smiled. "Don't insult me. I watched you in the courtyard. The way you moved, the way you assessed, you knew exactly what you were doing." Grace said nothing. "So I ask again, who are you?" The question hung in the air. Behind her, she sensed rather than saw Turner emerging from the kitchen, maintaining cover. The SEAL team held position, everyone waiting for what happened next. "Before I was a cook," Grace said slowly, "I was a lot of things." "SEAL? You don't let women into SEAL teams." "No, but they let them into CIA's Special Activities Division. They let them into Delta Force Selection. They let them into Task Force Orange." He stepped closer, his rifle still trained on her. "Which one were you?" Grace smiled thinly. "Does it matter now?" "It matters to me. Because I need to know who I'm about to kill." "Then you should probably know my name first." Grace's voice dropped. "Chief Petty Officer Grace Mitchell, Special Warfare Operator, SEAL Team 6 Support. 3 combat deployments before they disbanded the program." The words fell like stones. Behind her, she heard Turner's sharp intake of breath. The leader's eyes narrowed. "You're lying." "Am I?" Grace's posture shifted subtly. No longer compliant, no longer afraid. "Tell me how I took 7 trained soldiers in under 10 minutes. Tell me how I knew your entry patterns. Tell me how I turned a kitchen into a fortified position." "It was canceled. The program was canceled." "Yes," Grace agreed. "It was. Some of us didn't handle civilian life well. Some of us redeployed under different contracts. And some of us just disappeared. Took jobs where nobody would look twice. Where we could finally be invisible." She gestured at herself. "Just the cook." The leader's weapon wavered slightly. "If you were really what you claim, you wouldn't be here. You'd be behind a desk or teaching, not making eggs in a forward operating base. You don't know what you're talking about." "Then prove it." Grace's hand moved. Not toward a weapon she had none in reach. Just a small gesture, fingers arranged in a specific pattern. A hand signal, one that only people with very particular training would recognize. The leader's eyes went wide. That moment of recognition was all the opening Grace needed. She dove forward and left, creating an angle that put the leader's body between her and his guard's weapons. Her hand found Danny, yanked him down and away. Rivera, reading the movement, dropped on her own. 3 things happened simultaneously. Turner opened fire from the kitchen, suppressing the guards. The SEAL team sniper positioned on a rooftop Grace had identified an hour ago took his shot, and Grace pulled the knife from her belt and drove it into the leader's thigh, cutting the femoral artery with surgical precision. The leader collapsed. His guards tried to return fire, but they were caught in crossfire from 3 directions. Both went down within seconds. Silence fell over the compound. Grace held pressure on the leader's wound not to save him, but to keep him conscious. She leaned close to his ear. "You asked who I was," she whispered. "Now you know. And you'll live just long enough to regret finding out." His eyes glazed. Blood pooled in the dirt. SEAL operators flooded the courtyard, weapons up, clearing corners. Their leader, a commander Grace vaguely recognized, approached her position. She released the dying man and stood, hands visible. "Kitchen is secure," she reported. 12 civilians, no casualties. Turner's inside. 4 hostiles down in that building, 3 in the courtyard. The commander stared at her. "Who the hell are you?" Before Grace could answer, an older SEAL pushed through the group. He was gray at the temples, weathered. with the kind of face that had seen things nobody should see. He stopped 5 feet from Grace and went absolutely still. "Jesus Christ," he breathed. "Mitchell?" Grace met his eyes. "Hello, Captain Richards. We thought you were dead. After Jalalabad, after what happened," he shook his head in disbelief. "You just disappeared, dropped off every grid. 3 years, Mitchell. 3 goddamn years." "I know, sir." "Don't call me sir. Not anymore." He looked at the carnage around them, at the dead hostiles, at the saved civilians. "What are you doing here?" "Same as always," Grace said quietly. "My job." Richards looked like he wanted to say more, wanted to demand answers, explanations, maybe even apologies, but he was professional enough to table it. "We'll debrief later," he said. "Right now, get your people medical attention." "And Mitchell?" He paused. "Good work." Grace nodded. Then she turned and walked back to the kitchen, where Turner was helping civilians out of the cooler. They looked at her with new eyes. Fear, yes, but also something else. Respect. "You're really a SEAL?" Danny asked. His voice was hoarse. "Was," Grace corrected. Past tense. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Because that life was over. I was done. I wanted to be done." She looked around at their faces, and then today happened. Marcus approached slowly. "Grace, thank you. For everything. For keeping us alive. Just did what needed doing." "No," Marcus's voice was firm. "You did more than that. You were extraordinary." Grace had no response to that, so she just nodded and moved back to check the perimeter. But inside, something had shifted. A door she'd locked 3 years ago had been forced back open, and she wasn't sure she could close it again. Not after today. The SEAL team secured the compound in under 20 minutes. Professional, efficient, no wasted movement. Grace watched them work and felt a familiar ache, not nostalgia exactly, but recognition. Like seeing your own face in an old photograph. Medics treated the civilians for dehydration and minor injuries. The bodies were covered and tagged. The surviving equipment was cataloged. A helicopter was inbound for casualty evacuation. Grace stood in the kitchen doorway, apart from everyone. Her hands were clean now. She'd scrubbed the blood away, but she could still feel the weight of the knife, the recoil of the rifle, the wet sound of the blade finding its target. 3 years of trying to forget, 3 years of pretending, gone in 90 minutes. "You're good at disappearing," Richard said, approaching from behind. "I'll give you that." Grace didn't turn around. Wasn't hard. Nobody was looking. I was looking. Sent inquiries everywhere. You know what I found? Nothing. No paper trail, no digital footprint. Like you were never there at all. That was the point. Richards moved to stand beside her. He gazed out at the compound, at the damage, at the people she'd saved. "Jalalabad broke you. We all knew it. After what happened to Stevens and Ramirez. After the review board cleared you, but I don't want to talk about that. Maybe you need to." "I need," Grace said carefully, "to be left alone." "Can't do that. Not anymore." Richards pulled out a tablet, showed her a screen. "This base is compromised. The attackers were part of something bigger. We're still running down intelligence, but it looks like a coordinated assault on 3 forward positions. You stopped the one here. The other 2, he grimaced, didn't go as well." Grace felt cold despite the desert heat. "Casualties? 4 dead at FOB Sentinel North. 6 at Bravo Outpost. Could have been worse. Would have been worse here if you hadn't been in that kitchen." He lowered the tablet. "Command wants a full debrief. They want to know how a civilian cook managed to neutralize a trained assault team. I got lucky." "Bullshit. You got skilled. And Command wants that skill back in service." There it was. The ass Grace had been dreading since the moment Richards recognized her. "No," she said flatly. "Mitchell, no. I'm done with that life. I told you. I told everyone. Jalalabad proved I couldn't." Her voice caught. "I can't do it anymore. I can't make those decisions. I can't carry those losses. But you made decisions today. Good ones. You carried these people through hell and brought them out alive. That's different." Grace finally looked at him. "Because today I had no choice. Today there was no time to think, no time to second guess. I just reacted. But if you put me back in the field, back in situations where I have to plan, where I have to send people into danger, where I have to." She stopped. "I can't be responsible for anyone else dying." Richards was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Stevens and Ramirez made their own choices. They volunteered for that mission. They knew the risks. I should have seen it. I should have known the intelligence was bad. Nobody saw it. The entire command structure missed it. You think you're the only one who carries that? We all do. Every operator who came back when they didn't. That's the job, Mitchell. That's what we signed up for. Then I'm resigning from the job." "You already did. 3 years ago. And look where it got you, cooking eggs in the middle of nowhere, trying to pretend you're not what you are." "And what am I?" Richards gestured at the compound. "At the saved civilians. At the stopped assault. A protector. A warrior. Someone who runs toward danger instead of away from it. You can call yourself whatever you want, Mitchell. But today proved that you can't escape your nature." Grace had no answer to that. A commotion near the gate drew their attention. 2 vehicles were arriving, command staff, probably, coming to assess the situation and demand answers. Grace felt the walls closing in. "They're going to want to talk to you," Richards said. "I know. They're going to offer you reinstatement. Probably a promotion. Definitely a commendation. I don't want any of that. What do you want?" Grace looked at the kitchen behind her. At the civilians who were alive, because she'd remembered how to fight. At Turner, who was laughing with the medics despite his blown knee. At Marcus, who'd found courage he didn't know he had. "I want to go back to being nobody," she said quietly. "Too late for that, is it?" Richards studied her. "You really think you can just fade away again? After this? I have to try. Why? What are you so afraid of?" The question hit deeper than he probably intended. Grace was silent for a long moment before answering. "I'm afraid," she said slowly, "that if I go back to that life, I'll remember why I loved it. And then I'll never be able to leave again. And eventually, I'll get someone killed." She met his eyes. "I'd rather cook eggs for the rest of my life than carry another name I can't forget." Richards opened his mouth to argue. Then he saw her face, really saw it, the pain and exhaustion and determination, and he closed it again. "All right," he said finally. "I'll run interference with command, buy you some time. But Mitchell," he put a hand on her shoulder, "you can't run forever. Eventually, you're going to have to face what you are. And what happened in Jalalabad? Maybe," Grace said, "but not today." She walked back into the kitchen before he could respond. Stood in the space where she'd fought and killed and saved. The smell of coffee and bacon was gone, replaced by gunpowder and blood, but it was still her kitchen, still her territory, for now, at least. Outside, the command staff was getting briefed by Richards. Grace could hear raised voices, demands for answers, for details, for the person responsible. Turner was being questioned. Marcus too. Eventually, they'd come for her. But Grace was already planning her exit, already mapping out the next place to disappear, the next identity to assume, the next kitchen to hide in. Because Richards was wrong about one thing. She absolutely could run forever. She just had to stay ahead of her past. The debriefing took 6 hours. Grace sat in a borrowed office while 3 different officers questioned her. They went through the timeline minute by minute. Every decision, every kill, every tactical choice. She answered truthfully but provided no more detail than necessary. They asked about her background. She gave them her service record, the official one, with all the classified material redacted. They already knew most of it anyway. Richards had briefed them. They asked why she left. She said personal reasons. They pushed. She didn't elaborate. Finally, a Colonel Grace didn't recognize, leaned forward. "Chief Petty Officer Mitchell." "Just Grace," she interrupted. "I don't hold that rank anymore. Your discharge was honorable. The rank still applies. Not to me." The colonel frowned but continued. "Your actions today saved 12 civilians and eliminated a significant threat. Command is prepared to offer you reinstatement with full rank and back pay. Additionally, we'd like to discuss a consulting position where—" "No thank you, sir. You haven't heard the full offer." "Don't need to. I appreciate the recognition, but I'm not interested." "May I ask why?" Grace met his eyes. "Because I'm done. I did my time. I gave what I could give. Today was an exception, not a return to service. You're wasting exceptional skills. Respectfully, sir, they're my skills to waste. The colonel exchanged looks with the other officers. They'd clearly expected her to jump at the opportunity. Most people would have. We could make this a direct order, one of them said. Technically, you're still in the inactive reserve. You could, Grace agreed. And I'd challenge it through every legal channel available. And while we're all caught up in bureaucracy, you'd have an operator who doesn't want to be there, which makes me a liability instead of an asset. Is that really what you want? Silence. Finally, the colonel sighed. No, it's not. He closed his folder. All right, Chief Grace, we won't force the issue, but the offer remains open. If you change your mind, I won't. Fair enough. He stood, signaling the end of the debrief. You're free to go. There'll be some paperwork to sign regarding today's events, but nothing that should take long. And Grace? He paused at the door. Thank you for what you did. Regardless of your decision about the future. She nodded, waited until they left. Then she sat alone in the office and tried to figure out what came next. A knock on the door. Turner entered without waiting for permission. He was on crutches now, his knee properly wrapped. He looked exhausted but alive. Hey, he said. They done grilling you? For now. He sat across from her. I told them everything. About how you organized the defense, how you fought, how you saved everyone. He paused. I also told them you didn't want recognition. That you specifically asked not to be identified in any official reports. Thank you. They'll honor it. Richards is running point on the after-action report. He's keeping your name out of everything except the classified sections that nobody will see. Good. Turner studied her. You really don't want any of this, do you? The credit, the glory, the offers. Grace was tired of answering that question. But Turner deserved an honest response. He'd fought beside her, trusted her, followed her orders without hesitation. 3 years ago, she said slowly, I made a call in the field. Bad intel. 2 of my operators didn't come home. The review board cleared me, said I made the right decision with the information I had, but they're still dead. And I'm still alive. And I can't. She stopped. I can't carry any more names. Turner was quiet. Then he said, my first deployment, I lost my swim buddy to an IED. We were supposed to clear a building together, but I went left and he went right, because those were our assignments. He hit the wire. I didn't. Random chance. He leaned forward. I blamed myself for months. Why did I go left? Should I have checked his route first? Should I have switched with him? But my lieutenant sat me down and said something I didn't understand until later. You can't carry the weight of every decision. You'll collapse. All you can do is make the best call you can with what you know, and trust that your training will see you through. The rest is luck and timing. That's easy to say when you're not the one making the call. No, it's harder, because the people making calls have to live with them. Turner met her eyes. But that's why we train. That's why we have protocols. That's why we trust each other. Because no one person carries everything. We share the load. Grace said nothing. Look, Turner continued, I'm not going to tell you what to do. You've earned the right to make your own choices. But today you proved something important. You proved that you can still make the right calls. Under pressure, under fire. When lives are on the line. Today was different. Because I wasn't in charge. I wasn't responsible for the bigger picture. I just had to hold one position. You organized 12 terrified civilians into a defensive position. You neutralized 7 hostiles. You created the conditions that let us retake the compound with 0 friendly casualties. Turner's voice was firm. That's not just holding a position. That's command. Grace wanted to argue. But she was too tired. And maybe, in some small way, he was right. What are you going to do now? Turner asked. Disappear again. Find another base. Another kitchen. Another place where nobody knows me. You really think that's going to work? It has to. Because the alternative is going back to a life that broke me once already. And I can't survive breaking again. Turner stood, balancing on his crutches. For what it's worth, Mitchell Grace, I think you're stronger than you realize. And I think you're running from ghosts instead of facing them. But that's just my opinion. He headed for the door, then stopped. If you ever change your mind, If you ever decide you want back in, you've got at least one person who'd be proud to serve with you again." He left before she could respond. Grace sat alone for a long time. Outside, the compound was returning to some semblance of normalcy, damaged buildings being assessed, equipment being replaced. The civilians who'd been taken hostage were being prepared for transport to a larger base where they could decompress properly. Tomorrow, Grace would leave with them, go through the bureaucratic process of ending her contractor employment, collect her belongings, close out her accounts, vanish into whatever came next. But tonight, she stood in the kitchen one last time. Someone had cleaned it. The blood was gone, the bullet holes patched, fresh supplies already stocked. Like nothing had happened, like it was just a kitchen again, not a battlefield. Grace ran her hand along the counter where she'd hidden her knife 14 months ago. The same knife that had saved her life today. The same blade she'd hoped never to use again. "Some of us never stop being who we were," she whispered to the empty room. Then she turned off the lights and walked away. 3 days later, Grace stood in civilian clothes at the helipad, waiting for transport out. Her duffel bag held everything she owned, not much. Her paperwork was complete. Her contractor ID was deactivated. In another hour, she'd be gone from FOB Sentinel forever. The SEAL team was gathering nearby, preparing for their own departure. Regular rotation cycle, they'd been here 6 weeks, their deployment was ending. They moved with the easy confidence of men who'd done this 100 times. Grace kept her distance. No goodbyes necessary, no attachments made. Then Brennan, the team leader, broke away from his unit and walked directly toward her. Grace tensed. She'd avoided him during the debriefs, avoided all of them except Turner, who'd already been cleared for medical transport. Brennan stopped 3 feet away. His face was weathered, scarred, the kind of face that had seen combat and survived. His eyes were sharp, assessing. Then he did something Grace didn't expect. He saluted her. Proper military salute. Crisp, respectful. Grace stared at him. "I'm not military anymore." "No," Brennan agreed, "but you were, and you fought like it." He lowered his salute. "Turner told us what you did, how you organized the defense, how you held that kitchen against a professional assault team, how you kept everyone alive." "Turner talks too much." "Turner tells the truth." Brennan glanced back at his team. One by one, they were turning toward her, watching. "We wanted you to know something before you left." "What's that?" "That we recognize what you are, what you were. That bullshit about being just the cook?" He shook his head. "We all knew better after the first day. The way you moved, the way you watched. But we respected your cover, respected your choice to stay hidden. I appreciate that. But after what happened," Brennan's voice dropped, "you saved lives. Not just the civilians, us too. If you hadn't stopped that assault team, if they'd managed to hold the compound when we returned, the situation would have been exponentially worse. You gave us a clean tactical picture to work with. That matters." Grace didn't know what to say. "So we wanted to do this properly," Brennan continued. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. Extended his hand. In his palm lay a trident pin. Not official, this wasn't a formal ceremony. But the meaning was clear. "We know you can't wear it," Brennan said quietly. "We know you don't want recognition. But you earned it. Today and every day you served before. And we want you to know that we see you. We recognize you. We respect you." Grace's throat tightened. She took the pin carefully. The metal was warm from Brennan's pocket. She turned it over in her fingers, feeling the weight of everything it represented. "I can't accept this," she said. "You already did." Behind Brennan, the rest of the SEAL team had formed a loose line. One by one, they came forward. Not to salute that would draw too much attention, but to offer something else. Jenkins, the one who joked about her cooking that first morning, nodded to her. "Ma'am?" Young Patterson, barely 22, gripped her hand. "Thank you," he said simply. Another operator whose name Grace had never learned, "Hooya, Chief." They filed past. Quiet acknowledgement, professional respect, the kind of recognition that mattered more than any medal. When they were done, Grace stood alone with the trident pin in her hand and tears she refused to let fall. Brennan lingered. "Richards told us about Jalalabad, about what happened to your operators, about why you left." Grace stiffened. "That's classified. Not to us. Not anymore. Richards thought we should know who we were serving with. Brennan's voice was gentle. He also told us you blame yourself. That you carry those losses like they're your failure. They were my call. They were soldiers who made their own choices. Just like we all do. Just like you did today when you could have stayed hidden but chose to fight instead. He met her eyes. You're not responsible for every outcome. You're only responsible for doing your job to the best of your ability. And from what I've seen, you've always done that. It doesn't change what happened. No, it doesn't. But maybe it's time to stop punishing yourself for being human. Brennan stepped back. Wherever you go next, whatever you do, just know that you've got brothers and sisters out there who respect the hell out of you. And if you ever need anything ever, you have people you can call. He handed her a card. Just a phone number, nothing else. Grace took it. Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Brennan smiled slightly. Or should I say, thank you, Grace. He rejoined his team. They boarded their transport. Within minutes, they were gone, just another SEAL rotation cycling out, replaced by fresh operators who'd never know what happened here. Grace stood on the helipad, holding a trident pin and a phone number. The desert wind pulled at her hair. The sun beat down like judgment. Marcus approached from the operations building. He'd stayed behind to help with the transition, making sure all the logistics were covered before he left. Now he looked tired but determined. Your ride's almost here, he said. I know. Got a destination in mind? Not yet. Marcus nodded like he'd expected that answer. Grace, I just wanted to say, before you go, he struggled with words, you're one of the most remarkable people I've ever met. And I don't mean because of today. I mean because you chose to be kind even when you could have stayed distant. You chose to help even when you could have stayed hidden. You chose to save us even when it would have been easier to save yourself. I did what anyone would do. No. You did what only you could do. And I'll never forget that. He extended his hand. Thank you. Grace shook it. Then, impulsively, she pulled him into a brief hug. He stiffened in surprise, then relaxed. Take care of yourself, she said. You too. He left. Grace was alone again. The helicopter appeared on the horizon, growing larger, coming to carry her away to whatever came next. Grace looked down at the trident pin in her hand. She should throw it away, should refuse the recognition, should maintain her cover as nobody special, nothing important, just a cook who got lucky. But instead, she tucked it into her pocket. Not to wear, not to display, just to remember, just to carry. Because maybe Brennan was right. Maybe she'd been running from ghosts instead of honoring the people she'd lost. Maybe the best way to remember Stevens and Ramirez wasn't to hide from who she'd been, but to accept that their sacrifice had meant something, had taught her something, had made her into someone who could save 12 lives when it mattered most. The helicopter landed. The loadmaster waved her forward. Grace picked up her duffel and walked toward it. But before she climbed aboard, she turned back one last time. Looked at the compound, at the kitchen window where she'd fought, at the courtyard where she'd made her stand, at the base that would forget her name but maybe, quietly, remember that someone had been there when it counted. Then she climbed aboard and the helicopter lifted off, carrying her toward an uncertain future. But this time, maybe, she'd stop running quite so fast. 8 weeks later, Forward Operating Base Carson sat at the edge of the mountains, colder than the desert but just as remote. Smaller than Sentinel, quieter, fewer people, less chance of being recognized. Grace started her shift at 0430, same as always. She moved through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, made coffee, prepped breakfast, kept her head down. The assigned personnel filtered in around 0600. A maintenance crew, a small logistics team, no SEAL teams. This base handled supply coordination, not combat operations. Safe, boring, perfect. They nodded to her when she served coffee. Polite, distant. Nobody asked questions. Nobody knew her history. She was just the cook. Exactly what she wanted. But something had changed. Grace felt it in the way she moved through the kitchen, the way she noticed things, the way she couldn't quite turn off the part of her brain that cataloged exits and sight lines and defensive positions. The trident pin was hidden in her quarters, wrapped in the same oilcloth as her knife. She'd looked at it exactly once since arriving here, touched it, felt the weight of what it represented. Then she'd put it away and tried to forget about it. At 0700, the base commander stopped by the kitchen. Colonel Sarah Hayes, mid-40s, sharp eyes, professional demeanor. She'd been welcoming but not intrusive when Grace arrived. Good commander, kept appropriate distance. Morning, Grace, Hayes said. Colonel, coffee? Please. Hayes accepted the cup. How are you settling in? Fine. Everything I need. Good. I wanted to let you know we're expecting a supply convoy this afternoon. Nothing unusual, just the regular delivery. But with the weather turning, I want to make sure everyone's prepared if we get snowed in early. I'll adjust the inventory. Make sure we have extra dry goods. Appreciate it. Hayes paused. Grace, can I ask you something? Grace's guard went up. Of course. I got your file when you transferred here. Standard contractor paperwork. But there was a note from the previous base commander. Very brief. Just said you performed exceptionally during a crisis situation and should be considered a valuable asset. Hayes studied her. What happened at Sentinel? Security incident. I helped coordinate civilian evacuation. Must have been serious to warrant that kind of note. It was handled. Hayes nodded slowly. She knew Grace was being deliberately vague, but she also knew when not to push. Well, if you ever want to talk about it. I don't. But thank you. Fair enough. Hayes set down her empty cup. Welcome to Carson, Grace. Hope you'll be with us for a while. She left. Grace returned to her prep work. Sliced vegetables, prepared dough, simple work, honest work. But she couldn't stop thinking about the note in her file. Valuable asset. Richards must have written that, making sure she'd be taken care of wherever she went next, watching out for her even when she'd refused his offers. The morning passed. Lunch service came and went. Grace worked alone, efficiently, no complications. In the afternoon, she took inventory in the storage room, checking supplies, planning menus for the coming week. That's when she saw it. A new knife on the shelf. Not standard kitchen equipment. This was something else. Black handle, balanced blade, 7 inches of blackened steel. A Ka bar, identical to the one she kept hidden in her quarters. Grace picked it up. There was no note, no explanation, but she knew exactly what it meant. Someone on the SEAL team from Sentinel had made sure it ended up here, had tracked her new assignment and sent a message. You can hide, but you're still one of us. Grace held the knife for a long moment, felt its weight, felt the memories it carried. Then she found a place for it, not hidden under the counter like at Sentinel, but properly mounted on the wall near the stove, visible, accessible, just in case. At 1800 hours, Grace served dinner. The small crew ate quickly. Nobody paid much attention to the new knife on the wall. Why would they? It was just a kitchen tool, nothing special. But Grace knew different. That night, alone in her quarters, she pulled out the trident pin, held it in the lamplight, thought about Brennan's words, about Turner's encouragement, about the 12 lives she'd saved and the 2 she still carried. She thought about Stevens and Ramirez, about Jalalabad, about the decision she'd made with bad intelligence and the consequences that followed. And for the first time in 3 years, she let herself remember them properly. Not as guilt or failure, but as operators who'd made their own choices, who'd trusted her to lead them, who died doing the job they loved. I'm sorry I couldn't save you, she whispered to the empty room. But I'll try to honor what you taught me. Try to use what I learned. Try to be worth the second chance I got. The pin glinted in the low light. Grace studied it for a long moment. Then she found a small wooden box, lined it with cloth, and placed the pin inside. Not hidden. Not forgotten. Just waiting. For what? She wasn't sure yet. But maybe that was okay. Maybe she didn't need to have all the answers. Maybe it was enough to just keep moving forward, carrying her past without letting it destroy her, ready to act if the moment came again. Grace turned off the lamp, lay in the darkness, listened to the wind outside. Somewhere in the distance, she heard a helicopter. Maybe just supply transport, maybe something else. Either way, she'd be ready. Because some of us never stopped being who we were. We just learned to carry it differently, with dignity, with respect, with the knowledge that we did our best when it mattered. Grace closed her eyes. Tomorrow she'd wake at 04:30, make coffee, prep breakfast, be just the cook. But the knife would be on the wall. The pin would be in her quarters. And if the moment came, if duty called again, she'd answer. Not because she had to, not because anyone was forcing her, but because it was who she was. Always had been, always would be. Chief Petty Officer Grace Mitchell. SEAL. Protector. Survivor. Just the cook,